It's always the most terrifying part. I'm convinced that it's not going to record one of these days. So, but all right, if you guys are ready to go, we'll jump right in.
Sounds good.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to episode 15 of the Kansas Forest Service podcast. Today, I've got Luke Terry, who's the owner of Custom Forestry Applications, LLC, and Ryan Neises with me, who owns Ecotone Forestry. Guys, thanks so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks a lot for having us.
Yeah. So can you guys tell me, what is forestry contracting? I don't know that many people in Kansas will be familiar with just what that is.
Sure, I can go. I can give it a shot.
All right, thanks, Luke.
Yeah, so forestry contracting is it's similar to any other trade. Whether you're a mechanic or a home builder or a doctor, we're specializing in certain practices. Forestry, conservation, wildlife habitat projects, and so we rely on our schooling and then our practical field experience to complete a variety of on the ground projects that can benefit the landscape. We're typically professionals that only that continue to have experience through projects that we do, and kind of learn from other professionals in the area. And so that's really what the contracting is. In my view, it's a service that we can provide to private and public landowners to benefit natural resources.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke. Anything to add there, Ryan?
Yeah, I think he did a good covering there. I think other factors sometimes I run into why they're contracting with us is they may not have the equipment or the capability of doing some of the work. And with us contractors, like I said, as specialized, we may know some different practices and techniques that a typical landowner may not know. So benefits will be extra from getting a contractor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And to your point, Ryan, when I think a lot about the forestry contracting that you guys do and the projects I'm most familiar with is a lot of like timber stand improvement. So being able to go in and thin out trees, and it takes chainsaws and a lot of manual labor, and owning chainsaws and maintaining chainsaws is pretty expensive. So that might not be something that every landowner does or has access to. So can you guys tell me a little bit more about what kind of forestry work you guys do, and if you've got any interesting projects that you've worked on recently?
Oh, I'm actually try this a little bit. I think on different forestry projects in Kansas, I think it's very similar to all your other eastern hardwoods work. It's just maybe a little smaller scale or more along your riparian stream sides and stuff like that. But I mean, we do everything from tree planting, your maintenance of all your tree planting, like your herbicides and mowing, and then we do pruning of those plantations. And like you kind of mentioned, your forest stand improvement or the old typical code of TSI, the good old acronym that we also use a whole lot. Those are probably some of the key forestry work we do, but it's pretty variable, and we really do work on other natural resource concepts as well, some native grass planting. So a lot of times it does depend on what the landowner's objectives are and property capabilities are too.
Yeah, and I can add to that too. I mean, we're heavily involved with invasive species control, primarily bush honeysuckle in our woodlands. And I guess maybe I've coined the term that bush honeysuckle is probably the greatest threat to our woodlands that we have, and just because it's so dominant and in the understory, and it chokes out our native native vegetation or native trees, and it's so widespread. It produces hundreds of thousands of berries every year, and it just spreads like wildfire. And so we're pretty active in some pretty large scale invasive species control. And the other thing that Ryan, and I know Ryan works on as well as we do, is stream bank stabilization projects along riparian areas and in certain watersheds in the state. And so we're working hand in hand with folks at the Forest Service and other private dirt contractors to stabilize these stream banks to prevent sedimentation and nutrient loading into our federal reservoirs. And so really what that looks like is tree planting, seedling planting nuts and acorns, that sort of thing, along these riparian areas that have been freshly stabilized. And so there's tree planting, there's maintenance, as Ryan mentioned, and care for these trees.
So can you guys tell me a little bit about what kind of crews you run and the skills and background that they have?
Yeah, sure. I'll chime in first. I typically will have 2 to 5, 6 person crew. Right now I've got 4 employees, and most of those individuals will have some sort of bachelor's in science, whether it's forestry or natural resources or wildlife biology or conservation, and that really helps set the foundation for a lot of the techniques that you might learn about in college, and then actually apply to the ground. And so so that's kind of how we're set up. There's always room to add people as projects come and go, and we've been really blessed to always have, in my opinion, really top-notch quality people. And it's like any small business, that it's not so much the boss in charge, it's the people that are out doing the work that really makes the difference and keeps your reputation through the years. So I always tip my hat to those employees that we currently have and that we've had in the past.
And how about you, Ryan?
Yes, I usually run about a 2-3 man crew, and it's the same way. I'm always looking for someone that's natural resource background. I've had pretty good luck with actually hiring some foresters. Usually they're coming out of the state, but like I said, they've had pretty good experience with what we do, and in some cases, I think we train a lot of them some of the basics of forestry and natural resources. So I think they also get a really good learning experience from us if they're freshly out of college or something.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, kind of like Luke said, it's important for them to do a quality of work. That's what we pride ourselves on as well, is making sure our work's done right and the landowners are happy, and that really helps spread the word to other landowners as well.
So would you say, is that fairly common with forestry contractors, especially in Kansas, to have crews that have that much education, that are really specialists in forestry or wildlife biology or natural resources? Is that fairly common?
Personally, I think probably not. I think Luke and I are kind of the lone ones out there. And we are in Kansas. It is, forestry is not as popular as some of your other states, or as big of an issue. Realistically, knowledge of potential out there. Some of your other contractors may not be as educated. They probably have the desire and interest and passion of doing forestry. But like I said, in Kansas, I think Luke and I are probably some of the top ones with some of that education side of things.
So what motivated you guys to get into forestry? What I don't imagine that there's a lot of folks out there that, as kids, everybody wanted to be a firefighter, an astronaut. Did you guys always want to be in forestry and forestry contractors?
Well, I guess I never, you never really know the path that life's going to take you, but um, I was always interested in the outdoors, growing up, hunting and fishing and trapping, and my dad, he was a woodworking teacher for his career, and so he was always making cool things out of wood, and he kept us outside quite a bit, cutting firewood, and like I say, hunting and trapping, that sort of thing. And so, when it came time to figure out what I was going to do in life, it was, I had some main interest in the outdoors. The natural resources is what really kind of stuck out, and that's what I pursued. And how I got into this, I guess, is after graduated from K-State, I took a job as a environmental manager for a Native American tribe, and as our program would grow, we would put projects out for bid that were forestry and wildlife related, and we wouldn't have interest from contractors. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. Well, it was good and bad. I mean, I saw a need, I guess, and I kind of spurred this idea off and started, kind of side hustling, doing work on the weekends, and taking time off and that sort of thing. And eventually the business grew to where I could do it full time. And it's just been such a blessing to manage basically God's resources, and it's a resource that's not really, it's not ours, but we try our best to do what, use the know-how and the modern science that we have to manipulate it for whatever the objective is. And so that's kind of how I got started, kind of my, I guess, my story, so to speak.
So
Yeah.
Luke, oh, sorry, just one follow-up question there, Luke. What is your degree in from K-State then?
Yeah, my degree is in park management and conservation, and I was blessed to have Dr. Keith Lynch is our dendrology teacher, and like it didn't seem like a lot of fun to memorize all the scientific names and how to spell the trees and species and all that, but it really stuck with me. I still have the flashcards to this day that it has all that information on it. But I've had a number of professional mentors through the years, especially when I got started, that are just invaluable. Folks that were kind of on the end of their career, and they could see the passion that I had, and really took a liking to me, and taught me things, spent time with me, and that type of I guess commitment on their end is just, it's just like, I can't thank them enough. I mean, it was just such a key part of my career and how I've developed through the years.
Yeah, it's definitely a small and dedicated group of people involved in forestry. I don't imagine there's anybody that works in forestry or has gone through K-State to study natural resources that hasn't had a class taught by Dr. Lynch. He's a pretty phenomenal guy. How about you, Ryan? How did you get into forestry? What was your path?
I guess when I was actually a kid, one memory I remember, I guess, is I actually planted maple trees for our house, grew them in pots and transplanted them and all that stuff. And probably where I got some of that, but also like Luke's saying, is I was a lot of times outdoors, spent a lot of times outdoors, outdoors, like the outdoors, did a lot of hiking, all that stuff. And I did the same thing as I went to K-State. I actually went into landscape architecture first and learned quickly that I enjoyed my botany class more than my landscape architecture classes. So switched into the same major in park resource management, and even had, again, Dr. Lynch was a key professor there that got me interested in the trees and overall natural resources. I then actually did some work with wildlife and parks on a couple of summer seasons and liked the land management side of things. And actually, to finish my K-State degree, I did an internship at Table Rock State Park in Missouri, one of the biggest, busiest state parks over there, and learned from that I didn't want to be stuck in a park. I liked doing the land management, and actually from there transferred over to Missouri to get a degree in forestry. And I always expected to move out to Montana. It was kind of my dream, but learned quickly that I was learning Eastern hardwoods, not Western, forestry. So I stuck around in the Midwest and got a job actually with the Kansas Forest Service first as a watershed forester on a water quality grant. Watershed Riparian Forestry Initiative. And through that, I worked with a nonprofit group, the Lake Region RC&D, that was the sponsor of the grant. And we were, through a lot of the promotion of forestry work, we became, we were noticing there wasn't a lot of contractors out there, kind of like Luke was saying. We were promoting forestry, and we also running across landowners that didn't have the equipment to do specifically tree plantings and stuff like that. So we actually started, that's how Ecozone Forestry actually started, was a program from that nonprofit group. And I worked for them for 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 years. And then I ended up buying the business and all the equipment out. And Fran Bennett was the forestry chairman, was another key mentor to me. He was a very, very knowledgeable and has a extremely interesting background of everything he's done in his life. But he was kind of the key person in that organization to really push forestry and wanted a forester in their program. And that's kind of how I've kept on progressing, I guess, is each year kind of keep on doing forestry. And that's what I like is visiting new landowners and just kind of explaining all the potential that they have. That's kind of how I got into it.
That's awesome. So do you guys find that landowners in Kansas or those public land managers, do they have a full understanding or a full picture of what those forestry resources can provide to them, or how those are beneficial to the landscape?
I think some do and some don't. Some of the ones that are, and I would say a lot of your hunters that spend more times in their woods and that know kind of what they have and try to find, and probably educate themselves more of what they're needing. I think in some cases there's also some that don't understand what they have or what they're lacking. You get some, that feel as though the cedar hedge brush realistically is a good habitat because it's brushy and that's where they stay and stuff, but there's no food source. So there's some that understand what they have, and but there is still, I think, a lot of potential out there in Kansas forestry of landowners that don't think about their woodlands or just kind of, again, spend some of their time just enjoying their woods, but not managing it and knowing what they need to be doing. And like Luke kind of mentioned earlier, is about the invasive species, I think, is becoming more and more of a big issue. And I think that's one of the keys, is making sure they're aware of some of those issues. that this is something that they have on property, and what the issue, what it can become if they don't manage it.
Mhm. How about you, Luke? If we've got Luke or not, I don't know if you can hear me. Are you there, Luke? There he is. Luke, I can see your mouth moving, but I don't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. I see woodlands as really an undervalued resource on the landscape. And it's pretty obvious when we get out in the timber and start evaluating the situation. We do have a pretty healthy, maybe not healthy, but a fairly established oak, walnut, hickory timbers throughout eastern Kansas. But oftentimes it's just choke full of undesirable shade tolerant species. So primarily hackberry, elm, locust, cedar hedge, and then the invasives that Ryan mentioned. And so we're in a really bad spot. And when I say that, it's mainly tied to the lack of management. And so we've created, I guess, our own problem by not working in the woodlands. And so these lesser desirable tree species, both for wildlife and for timber production, that sort of thing, are so prevalent. And it's like I say, it's mainly due to kind of a hands-off approach. The woods will take care of themselves. And and that's where Ryan and I get involved. We evaluate the timber with the district foresters that are throughout the state with the Kansas Forest Service. And so what we're trying to do is release or essentially kill these lesser than desirable tree species around our typically our mass producing trees, our oaks, our persimmon, our hickory, and then our fairly valuable walnut timber species. And so I think oftentimes, like, we kind of coin woodlands as like just wasteland. I hear that a lot, and that's far from the truth at all. And so I hope more get involved and listen to this podcast and contact their district forester, because you really have when it comes to wildlife value, like a tremendous asset with trees and the things that we can do to manipulate that habitat to benefit whatever result you might want.
Yeah, thanks for that. It is definitely an interesting challenge to get people to think about their woodlands as a resource and not just a nuisance or something that will take care of itself. So would you guys say that's the biggest challenge you run into in forestry contracting, is just getting people to recognize the value in the woodlands, or are there other challenges that you guys run into regularly?
I would say, I'll go ahead, Ryan.
Go ahead, Luke. You're welcome.
I mean, I say it's one of the challenges. It's maybe not the largest challenge, but there's so much patchwork, I guess, patchwork management throughout the landscape. And so we'll work in one property, and then all the adjacent land around it is really not managed. And so kind of wide scale improvement really isn't happening. So I see that as a pretty big downfall. And honestly, the invasive species is probably the biggest threat that we have to the woodland community. You know, and I guess one other probably other concern is just the follow-up. You know, there's probably you know, it's kind of like building a house or so. You know, you build it and everything's nice and perfect, and then in a few years, well, you need to do a little upkeep, and then a few more years, you know, you need to put a new coat of paint on. Well, you know, working in the timber is pretty similar. You know, we'll go through and we'll do a pretty heavy, you know, thinning project, and that's not the end of it. You know, you kind of get out of it what you put in it, and so that follow up, you know, year, you know, 2, 3, 5, 10, you know, 20 years down the road, it is needed, and oftentimes it's kind of like a one and done almost, you know, and so the follow up is almost as important as the initial attack.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Even back on the young plantings we do, that's one thing I think is fairly a challenging side of things, and it varies from landowner to landowner. Some take some initiative, because in some cases we go in and do the tree planting, you know, in coordination with the landowner, or because they didn't have the equipment or some sort. But then there's a lot of maintenance, you know, with those plantings afterwards. We do a lot of tree shelters nowadays realistically with the deer and browse. Without a tree shelter, you don't have a very successful planting in the first place. But all of those need a yearly maintenance almost. You know, if the deer come in and break the stake, or flood comes in and knocks them over, there's been a lot of those projects that I've been through over the last number of years, that if we'll go maybe back to the first couple of years, but then after that, you know, we don't get the management, or they're not interested in paying us to manage it. They don't have the cost share to do it. And then I sometimes will stop by if I'm in the area and, you know, shelters are down or the trees are getting browsed by the deer, and it's kind of sad to see some of that lack of maintenance on some of those plantings. And I think another big challenge we've got in forestry is like Luke kind of talked about, is a lot of those shade tolerant species that we're not managing, but also our most valuable trees are bur oak and our walnut, and they're the ones that are getting harvested. And without management after that harvest has been done, we're going to have woodlands of hackberry and low value hackberry, or elm, or whatever other species we have. And I think that's going to be another issue down the road. And I see that on sometimes I'll visit landowners' properties and want to do some forestry work, and they talk about their history, and they said, oh yeah, 10, 15 years ago, we did a harvest or whatever. I walk the woods, and most of the dominant trees are hackberry. And there's a lot of, not as much opportunity there, because of the lack of management after that previous harvest. So in some cases, they almost have to start over. And that's another challenge, I think, is our regeneration side of things in forestry. And like I said, some places you see some great regeneration and some you don't. And I still think that's a challenge we have, and I haven't really figured out the key of it yet either.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of work to manage a tree resource, whether it's an existing woodland or a new planting. These landowners definitely have their work cut out for them maintaining those. So what are some of the most rewarding experiences you guys have had in your time contracting or in forestry?
I think one of the things I like about it is we are, you know, we get to spend our days out in the woods, but also meeting so many different landowners as well, and some of them do have a lot of passion for the woods. Some of them are members of the tree farm community or the Walnut Council, or Kansas Forestry Association, and they have a good passion of their woodlands, and we can help them kind of extend that passion, maybe get more done for them than they can do on their own. And I think the other kind of thing is watching some of those plantings that are successful, growing, and seeing how those become new forests, and see that regeneration out there. That's going to have what I also always see, those tree plantings as future work for us as well, when we get to go out and do the timber stand improvement down the road.
Yeah, I think Ryan hit it right on the head. I mean, we're outside, we're working in the woods, and we get to see some beautiful scenery and watch the trees grow, and it's a lot of fun to look at plantings that were done 12, 13 years ago, and see how large those trees have grown. And so besides that, like Ryan said, meeting some pretty unique and colorful landowners, and is always a joy. And some of them went from customers to friends through the years, and and even some have passed on. And so it's you really cherish those relationships that come your way. And I think that's, to me, one of the biggest things that I enjoy about the work.
Yeah, it's definitely the people and the landowners that make conservation work enjoyable and worth it at the end of the day, I think, for many of us. So what are some things that those landowners should look for in a contractor, and how can they find a forestry contractor in their area?
Go ahead, Ryan, if you want, or I can dive in.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think looking in for a contractor, looking at their training and experience, specifically in the practices that you're looking to do as well. And I think as well as making sure that they understand your objective, and can either enhance that objective based on their knowledge and experience. And I think another key thing is a little bit of making sure they're properly licensed on some of the stuff we do. Our commercial pesticide applicators. So we have to go through training on every couple of years or whatever, and we keep up with those, because that's, I think, the other key on some of our projects and some of our successes a little bit is we have specialty chemicals that we can use on trees that won't affect the trees and help the weed control and stuff like that might not be cost effective for landowners to do or to purchase or whatever. But a good way to find a contractor is likely asking your district forester. They've got a contractors list, and kind of list which ones, where they're at, which ones have training through them. And like I said, a lot of your conservation districts and your natural resource conservation service has listings as well, on for some of us. Just depends on their list, I guess, they keep.
Anything to add there, Luke?
Yeah, the other thing I'll just add, I mean, Ryan again hit it on the head. The most successful projects are those where the landowner is highly involved and interested. And occasionally we'll get projects where it's just kind of hey, I got this contract, go in and do it type of work, and those are less enjoyable, I guess. And so most of these practices are fairly new to the landowners. And so when a contractor rolls into a site or meets with a landowner, typically the district foresters or watershed foresters have just like set us up perfectly as far as they've educated the landowner. They've, oftentimes been out walking the woodlands with them, marking timber, talking about what's going to happen, during the work and what it's going to look like a year or two afterwards. And so, to me, that's a huge benefit. District foresters do a great job, in my opinion, in kind of leading us right into actually working with the landowners. And so, that's really important. It makes our jobs much easier.
So if folks are interested in the work that you guys are doing currently or are learning more information about your businesses, where can they find that at?
I unfortunately don't have a website up and rolling yet. I've got a, I have a address or whatever, but have never had the time to actually get anything posted or developed, unfortunately. Most of the time, like I said, I'm on the contractors list, consultant foresters list. Most of the time, I think a lot of people find me just through word of mouth a little bit too, or like I said, your district forester. I've got a lot of business cards spread out there.
Yeah, and we're on Facebook, so we've got a custom forestry application page, and so you can check that out. It has all our contact information. Conservation districts are a great resource. District foresters, another good one to check with are the district biologists for wildlife and parks, and so we do we work pretty close with those guys, and so a lot of the private lands biologists, know who the consulting foresters or habitat contractors are kind of in their assigned districts. And so that's a really good resource as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. And do you guys have anything else to add or anything you'd like the listeners to know as we wrap up the podcast here?
I think one other thing just kind of thought about is the Forest Service and some of the partners, I guess, do have their field days, and typically Luke and I are at those field days and wearing our shirts and stuff like that. So that's another way to get to not only be on a project that could have similar practices that we do, but and possibly we may have even done the work there. I know on the future agroforestry field day, we did the tree planting there for wells. So those some of those events that we are partners with are another way to learn more about forestry and even find out about contractors.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ryan. And we are finally getting back to having some in-person events. So we've got our fall forestry field day scheduled for October 13th this year. And that'll be down just outside of Erie, Kansas at River Farms, which is Ted Cambridge and his family's place down there. So you can check our website and Facebook for information on that and how to get registered. So that's definitely a great way to get introduced to some of these practices and some forestry contractors that might be there. So will we see you guys there, Ryan and Luke?
I definitely will be there.
Yep,
Brother
for sure.
Perfect. Well, we'll have a cult following for you guys. You're going to be famous by then with the podcast. There's going to be folks asking for autographs. I can see it now.
I'll make sure to bring my Sharpie.
Yeah.
Good plan. But, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today and talking a little bit about forestry contracting and what that looks like here in Kansas. I know it's definitely a valuable resource that landowners can use and have access to. So really appreciate y'all taking the time to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, and I'll hit stop recording.